Templar here. Now I normally don't do news stories, generally speaking, because I do all these videos and I kind of have staggered release because I don't always have time to make videos, but I want to keep providing content. And if I didn't, I don't normally have time to make news videos the day they come out, and I don't want to make a couple and then disappoint you because you come to expect it from me. But this I think is very instructive, and this will stay relevant pretty much forever. So this is an article from World News Daily. I'll post the link from Drudge. So let's see here. So psych major judge overrides doctors on Dinesh D'Souza. So as you may know, Dinesh D'Souza is in trouble for campaign finance laws. I don't actually even care. I like Dinesh D'Souza. He's a good guy. I have some conflicted feelings about him and guys like Alan West and it in general. I'll do that in another video, though. I think I covered that in a video I did on Dr. Ben Carson. Dinesh D'Souza is a bit more awkward, though. I will say I do have a lot of respect for the man. His book, What's So Great About Christianity, was one of the things that led to my conversion. So, let's see here. I'll read from the article. At a hearing Monday in Manhattan in which he ruled filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza must continue community service for 4 more years, which seems absurd to me for election financing law. Okay, the judge ruled that Dinesh D'Souza's violation of federal campaign finance laws to be evidence of a psychological problem and ordered further counseling. What the hell is that? Really? When you consider all the shit that's not ruled a psychological problem, like none of the stuff that didn't do is ever ruled a psychological problem. Most people who kill people brutally, that's not a psychological problem. Pathological lying isn't a psychological problem. Trannies aren't a psychological problem. So like cutting your dick off isn't a psychological problem, and I know that'll offend people, but whatever. So like cutting your dick off is not a psychological problem. Like putting spacers in your ears that like distort them, ruining your body with tattoos, believing it's healthy to be morbidly obese. These aren't mental problems, but breaking campaign finance laws are. So, his lawyer pointed out that to the court that a psychiatrist who he was ordered by the court to see, so this wasn't some guy he paid. The court ordered him to go see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist found no indication of depression or reason for medication. In addition, an additional psychologist provided a written statement concluding there was no need to continue the consultation because Dinesh D'Souza was psychologically normal and well-adjusted. How would depression cause him to violate campaign finance laws? I don't see a connection. It's a random diagnosis to make. Depression isn't really related to that. I could see narcissism or sociopathy or even schizophrenia, as we'll get to in a minute. But depression? I know a fair bit about psychology, and that's bullshit. I don't understand why this is even happening. Well, no, I do understand, and we'll get to that. I mean, we'll get to why this is happening. But Judge Berman disagreed, effectively overruling the judgment of 2 licensed psychologists, including the one the court told him to see. Let's see here. I insist on psychological counseling as part of Mr. D'Souza's sentence because I wanted to be helpful. I am requiring D'Souza to see a new psychological counselor and continue the weekly psychological consultation, not as part of his punishment or to be retributive. A requirement for psychological counseling, and here's the kicker, comes up in my hearings in cases where I find it hard to understand why someone did what they did. He could not understand how someone of D'Souza's intelligence could do something so stupid as to violate federal campaign contribution laws. Okay. Well, we're just going to go into detail about this. D'Souza, it was a psychology minor. that his social work training combined with his psychology. Okay, so I'm not even going to go into more detail. This is very obvious what's happening here. This judge, who is a Democrat, and let me see, I'd send this article somewhere. I saw it somewhere else. He is a registered Democrat. He is a liberal. And liberals are incapable of understanding that people disagree with them. It's actually, I think, a psychological condition. It really pisses me off. Like, members of my family, I will tell them what my political views are, and they will ignore it. And they will ignore it because they can't understand someone who speaks as intelligently as I do can hold a view like that. And that's basically what I think this is getting down to. I think this has nothing to do with campaign finance. I think he can't understand why a minority who's as smart as Dinesh D'Souza would make a movie like Obama's America. Would write books defending Christianity, would be such an outspoken rightist or outspoken conservative. He can't understand that, so he believes that there's something psychologically wrong with him that makes him hold right-wing political views. And this is where shit like authoritarian personality disorder comes from. This is where the fascism scale comes from. This is where all that shit comes from. Okay, let's see here. In previous court appearances, argued were a felony under federal law were more reflective of an oversight of a relatively small amount of money. Okay, so how much do you want to bet, like everything else in modern America? Let's see, these fucking federal finance laws are so complicated that no human being can understand them. Because remember how long the tax code is like, I think it's like 20,000 pages long or something. Or maybe it's longer. So how the fuck is anyone supposed to actually read that and understand it? It's beyond the capacity of a human to do. We are all in violation of probably hundreds of laws at any one time. Because there's so fucking many of them. And no one can know them all. No one can read them all. Lawyers can't figure this shit out. Or these court cases wouldn't even go to trial. And I'm not against government regulation, but the Romans, for their criminal code, had it written on 12 tables and displayed in public for everyone to see. And everyone, even if they were illiterate, had to memorize them. I think Tacitus said, the greater the number of laws, the more corrupt the state. And that's a very good explanation. So what we have here is a convergence of everything the left has done to society. 8 months of confinement? What the fuck? Confinement? For $10,000 that broke some stupid law? He had to pay, okay, let's look at this, sorry. 8 months in a work release center, 5 years of fucking probation, a $30,000 fine, and 4 years of community service. This is more than, assault gets. This is more than what some rapists get. Rapists don't have to serve that long a sentence, at least not in Canada. In Sweden, there is some raped a bunch of Swedish girls, and he got 4 months. So that's okay. But Dinesh D'Souza, because he's a conservative, because he's a rightist, because he's so outspoken about it, and because he's intelligent, they can't understand why he would hold those views. So this is basically just political persecution. This is crazy. But this is not unprecedented. I don't know if you're familiar with the category of sluggish schizophrenia. So let's go into detail about this. Sluggish schizophrenia is an independent diagnostic category that is characterized by a slowly progressive course and included in the systematics of schizophrenia developed by Soviet psychologist Andrei, I can't pronounce it, and his Soviet colleagues. The diagnosis was the most infamous of diagnoses used by Soviet psychiatrists. The term sluggish schizophrenia was invented. The notion of sluggish schizophrenia allowed for the diagnosis of schizophrenia to be made even in the total absence of symptoms or signs of psychosis. Now this is very important because there's a total absence in the case of Dinesh D'Souza, even down to the fact that he obviously has no symptoms. the psychologist the court appointed said he had no symptoms. Uh, okay, so let's see here. Uh, the theory of sluggish schizophrenia is so hazy that it can be applied to any individual, whether mentally sick or healthy, and has been rejected by the world psychiatric community. The application of the theory to political dissidents has been internationally condemned. So it was basically something they made up in the Soviet Union because, like this guy, and this is my opinion, he can't understand why Dinesh D'Souza disagrees with him politically, so he labels it a mental illness. Because to him, there's no way that Dinesh D'Souza could have come to right-wing beliefs, and the Indians are pretty right-wing people. Um, Even though they voted for a socialist party for decades, India's pretty right-wing, um, at least socially speaking. So it's not really, and I know Indians in Canada, Hindus tend to vote. Well, Dinesh D'Souza is a Christian, but Indian Hindus tend to vote conservative. They tend to be to the right of the Conservative Party. So it's not really out of whack with his background. But to him, he can't understand why a smart guy would disagree with him, and the system can't, so he's inventing something similar to sluggish schizophrenia. Because um, in the Soviet Union, they could not understand why people would disagree with communism, so they made it a mental illness. So let's see here. Let me just scroll through this a bit. On the orders of the KGB, thousands of social and political reformers, aka dissidents, were incarcerated in mental hospitals after being labeled with diagnosis of sluggish schizophrenia, a disease fabricated in the Moscow School of Psychology. Um, he was charged with clinically developing a system of diagnosis which could be bent for political purpose, and he himself diagnosed or was involved in a series of famous dissident cases, and in dozens of cases he personally signed a commission decision on legal insanity of mentally held dissidents, including the following. American psychiatrists stated that Western criticism directed against him personally because he was responsible for the diagnosis of sluggish schizophrenia with reformism. Reformism is a mental illness. So if you're against the progressive order, that is enough to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is among the most serious of mental illnesses. Like when people think of lunacy or people acting like a lunatic, that's very often schizophrenia. Because really weird shit happens. Like the guy in Canada who like cut someone up with a machete and then ate him on a bus, he had schizophrenia. I'm not saying all schizophrenic people are like that, but it is among the most serious mental illnesses. Okay, so it was developed by the KGB and the Communist Party and understood what they were doing. This seems to many Soviet psychiatrists a logical explanation why someone would be willing to abandon his happiness, family, and career for a conviction so different from what most individuals believed or made themselves believe. So, yeah, I mean, that sounds exactly like this. He can't understand why Dinesh D'Souza would go against the progressive world order, especially being an Indian. Because if he was on the left, they would trumpet him for being such a great intellectual. And he is an intellectual. Dinesh D'Souza is a very smart guy. He's very well spoken. He's a very good writer. He's pretty based actually. He's pretty red pilled. Let's see here. What are the a careful description of sluggish schizophrenia established that psychotic symptoms were not essential for the diagnosis, which is psychotic symptoms is viewing or hearing things that don't exist. And that is basically what schizophrenia is. That is the only really important part of schizophrenia. Symptoms of all these things, including pessimism, poor social adaptation, and conflict with authorities, and were themselves sufficient for a formal diagnosis of sluggish schizophrenia with few symptoms. Let's see here. The incidence, let's see, does it give totals as to how many happened? diagnosed a reform delusion in every case where a patient develops a new principle of human knowledge, drafts an ideal of human happiness, or other projects for the benefit of mankind. Let's see here. Theories which contained ideas about reforming society, struggling for truth, and religious conviction were considered delusional in Soviet psychiatry, which is basically all the things that Dinesh D'Souza espouses. So let's see here. How did they do it? A special psychiatric hospital of the prison type. Look at the name. The Leningrad Special Psychiatric Hospital prison type of the USSR, Ministry of Internal Affairs. Uh, so, like, let's see. Does it say how many people they, statistics. Because of this form of schizophrenia, Russia in the 1980s had 3 times as many schizophrenic patients per capita as the U.S., 2 times as many as other major developed countries. There were not as many schizophrenic patients in any other country of Western ones. Um, let's see here. Boiled down to, okay, but a system of opinions by millions of people were diagnosed with sluggish schizophrenia. So you don't think this shit is coming. It happened in the Soviet Union, and this is the first step. This is fucking crazy. If they get away with this, God knows what they can do. And Dinesh D'Souza is a rich guy who has some like media backing from the conservative media and from like private activists. So this is absolutely absurd and crazy. So just watch out, guys. This is example number 10 million of how the left are fucking nuts and what they're going to do to this country. Anyways, guys, this is Argent Templar signing out.